Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Janosch Delcker. I'm a correspondent for Politico in Berlin, and I cover artificial intelligence. And before I invite my guest up on stage, I'd like to go back in time a year and a half ago in Paris. At Sorbonne University, French President Emmanuel Macron was addressing a group of students, a large group of students, and he told them Europe needs to become more ambitious if it wants to compete in the global race for technology. He said, I quote, "I want Europe to take a leading role in this revolution through radical innovation." And then he added something which keeps on, which officials, no matter whether in Berlin or Paris or elsewhere in Europe, keep on bringing up ever since then. He said, "I propose that over the next 2 years, we create a European agency for disruptive innovation in the same vein as DARPA in the United States during the conquest of space. This must be our ambition. Today, we have a unique window to do that." So Macron's vision is that such an agency would help the EU to catch up with the US and Asia in the global race for artificial intelligence. That was in September 2017, so a year and a half ago. And just yesterday, the European Commission announced that it would ramp up the money that it's spending on its European Innovation Council, bringing up the funding, for example, during the next 2 years, up to €2 billion. So is that it? Is the European Innovation Council, or EIC, the European DARPA that people have been waiting for and people have been speaking about? That's what I would like to talk about with the man whose job it is to oversee investment in Europe and to coordinate efforts to make sure the continent remains competitive. And I'd like to invite up on stage Jyrki Katainen, the European Commission Vice President for Jobs, Growth, Investment and Competitiveness. Mr. Vice President, before we start our conversation, let's briefly turn to the audience and ask you to do another survey for us on Slido. The question, you can already see it up on stage, is if Europe gets its own DARPA-style agency to promote disruptive technologies, who should take the lead in setting it up? Should it be the EU? Does Europe need no DARPA-style agency? Should it be member state governments or the private sector? We'll take a look at that in a couple of minutes. But now, Mr. Vice President, my question to you, is the EIC the European answer to DARPA?
Well, the time will show how successful EIC will be, but it's one novelty, and our attempt is to create something similar as we have created in the research world. Maybe somebody of you have heard about the European Research Council, which is very well taken. All the creme de la creme researchers tries to get EU ERC grants because they are very generous. They are totally different than most of the national research grants what the research groups can receive. So it's the investment research in Europe. So now we try to create something similar to the innovation side, as we support lots of research, but then innovations are not supported as strongly as the fundamental research. So I believe that the Carlos Moedas' idea of creating European Innovation Council is worthwhile, and it may create something similar as DARPA is. But I must add that it's not sufficient if there's only the EU EIC. We need more competing setups, because I believe in competition, and if member states want to create competing setup, it's always positive, and it will widen the scope.
And we'll talk about that in a second, but before we get to that, can you give us sort of more of an insight into how this EIC is going to look like eventually? It's been set up for a couple of years in a pilot phase. It's going to kick off completely once in 2021. But is, for example, in very basic terms, is the structure that you're building up there, is that comparable to what DARPA does in the US?
I don't know DARPA that well in terms of governance, but EIC, European Innovation Council, is very easy. I can put it to a nutshell to say that if there is an innovator who thinks he or she has a good idea to change the world, they can apply resources from the EIC. There is a panel to which you have to pitch your case, and then they may end up giving you resources for your innovation. And this grant financing is just one part of the whole innovation ecosystem which we have been building during the last few years. Capital Markets Union is one at least equally important, because one difference between the EU and the US is that our capital market is not as well developed as it is in the United States. So we are much more bank-driven economy than the US is, and many of the young companies cannot raise loans because they cannot give any and they don't have anything against which they could raise loans. So capital financing is a precondition for doing some innovations. So that's what EIC is all about. So basically, you can pitch your case to the auditing committee, and then you either get or not financing for a project.
And there's one element that seems to be, at least seems to have had some inspiration from the DARPA model, is the idea of program managers. That you're going to have program managers that will oversee the respective projects full-time and sort of like steer them into the right direction.
Yeah.
You announced that you will recruit the first sort of like group of program managers soon. Where are you looking for these people? Because they must be super qualified, I guess.
Of course, yeah. So that's another dimension of EIC. Money is one element, but then steering or kind of supportive personalities who know things by their own experience is equally important. So we are looking at competent people who are ready and willing to help the others, like they usually do in their own circles. But the beauty of EIC is that we try to bring all those knowledgeable, experienced people from all parts of Europe together. Because even though we are quite united or integrated in the EU, we still are fragmented comparing the US. So there are good ecosystem, good groups of people, very knowledgeable business angels in all of our member states, but they don't know necessarily each other. So now we are recruiting people who have experience from all over Europe, and this will create a European structure or European setup for innovations.
And what's the plan? Because that is just sort of the question that is always the elephant in the room these days. Or is there a plan for the UK? How much is the UK going to be part of the EIC?
Well, EIC financing is primarily for EU member states because we are using EU taxpayers' money. That's it. But many times, promising innovators are very closely linked to the other peoples or other companies around the world. So we have to look at this reality too. But as we are using European taxpayers' money, it's primarily targeting to EU companies.
Let's have a look at the result of our poll now, if we may. So 79% said the EU should take the lead when it comes to some sort of DARPA-style agency in Europe. 11% the private sector, 5% member state governments. That's sort of a clear image. We have to sort of stress the fact that we are in Brussels. You mentioned this already. The EU is not the only one who is sort of in the process of setting up some kind of agency along those lines. There is, for example, the Joint European Disruption Initiative, the speaker of which will be up on stage later today. There's the ATTRACT project, which is backed by a consortium of research organizations. There are several initiatives on the level of member states in Germany, and which I cover. There's the German government just set up 2 agencies for disruptive innovation, both the civilian side and the military security side. So all those different initiatives, are they competitors against each other?
Hopefully so, because we need competition, and it's very good that we have different ways to look at the same issue. Also, I mean, I don't believe that EU EIC alone could address the whole problem we have currently. It's good that we create the European structure which brings these networks together in the European level, but obviously we need also national or sectoral platforms. So there is no need to restrict by any means the local or sectoral or national activities in this. So I also believe that how to organize the platform may matter, how successful they are, and in that sense it's very good that there are competitions of various actors in the field.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about artificial intelligence, because that's what we're talking about, and Commissioner Jourova just already said what she thinks about it. Your successor as Finnish Prime Minister, Alexander Stubb, just told a colleague of mine in an interview that he believes there should be a commissioner for artificial intelligence in the next commission. What do you think about that pitch?
Why not? Because it's so prominent or crucial element in our societies. I believe that there are 2 mega trends in the world economy in coming years. The first one is artificial intelligence, and another one is circular economy. Those are the prevailing trends to which we have to adapt, or actually we should take a lead on these 2 topics. It's easy to say that let's have AI commissioner. I have nothing against it, but I just try to imagine what are the elements which we should understand when building the European capacity on AI. For instance, education and skills are extremely important. I have one pitch I want to make later on, if you allow. Yes. On this issue, but also how to use public data. European economy is so public driven, so we have much more public data available than anyone else. So how we make it available for those who want to use it. Then ethical code, what Vera just mentioned, it's of the utmost importance. So there are a whole range of areas or issues which should be covered by someone or a group of commissioners when looking at AI. I'm a coordinating vice president for several commissioners. Maybe there could be vice president for AI, who could cover the whole range of the topics and make it consistent.
And before we get to your pitch, the commissioner was pretty clear that she could see herself in that role.
Yeah, I mean, Vera would be fantastic vice president for AI.
Or vice president for AI. What about What about yourself?
I have decided to step down, so I'm going to leave these circles after this mandate.
Okay. And what if I just may ask, because Alexander Stubb brought it up, do you think he would be sort of a good fit?
He would be certainly a good person to take this role also, unless Vera wants to keep it.
Okay. You said you have a pitch with you.
Yeah, well...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to raise this skills and education part because AI will change our society so profoundly that we have to make sure that people understand what it is about. I'm not talking about coding or becoming engineer, but understanding what role the AI has in our society. So if you imagine that currently, can you imagine, almost 25% of adult Europeans have significant shortages in literature and math. Almost a quarter of our adults cannot read and write and count properly. So what is our future unless we do something with this? So we have to educate our people much better than what we have done before. And there is one concrete example, and this is just a little example, but very fascinating It's called Elements of AI. Look at it from your smartphone, Google, or just type elementsofai.com. It's online course, AI course, done by Helsinki University and Reactor. It's free of charge. There is already almost 150,000 users who are using this. And if anyone of you is interested in this, just do the course. I'm doing it currently. So
where are you? Which chapter?
So I'm just in the beginning. During the flights. I try to study it. It's very easy. You can do it by your mobile phone. So this is just one concrete thing I wanted to say. But I recently visited Stockholm, and I participated to the event which was organized the Academy of Sweden, and there were representatives from labor unions, also from employers' organization, and some foundations, and they were actively trying to devise how to shape adult education. There were labor union leaders who said that they are actively already now discussing with their members that your job will disappear in 10 years' time for sure. So it means that we have to help you to educate yourself to different sector, or then we have to upgrade your knowledge. And that is something which should be spread around. Because I believe that the content or the market which is best prepared for AI era is the one which is highly educated, where people accept and trust on AI. So that's why the education, even the principal education, but also the adult education is such an important topic.
And whose job is that to do that, this upskilling or this education? Is it the private sector? Is it the public sector? You know,
I think both. So private sector usually knows better what are the future skills. Sometimes public sector knows also, but so for instance, in the Sweden's case, they try to do it together. So there are employers, but also government is involved in this working group. So they try to figure out what is the role of the private sector employers, and what is the public sector's role. And that's why we need also new innovations to adult educational systems, because we have created our educational systems for the era which is now going to be past. So they cannot be fit for purpose for the future. So that's why we need also new social innovations in the educational systems.
Part of your portfolio is investment. And there is a big debate currently out in the open and behind closed doors here, how much regulation is necessary for AI to sort of mitigate the risk, but at the same time foster innovation and boost investment. What's your take? How much regulation do we need and when?
I really don't know. And that's why I don't want to rush to regulate. The only thing I know is that whatever technology we are talking about, it must be ethically sustainable. That's I know for sure. But what else, I really don't know. That's a big issue for all of us, whether there is some particular angle apart from ethical issues which should be regulated as a matter of urgency or not. But you are right that in favorable business environment encourages investment. Actually, I don't know what is the difference between the United States and Europe in this respect, whether the regulatory environment is that much different. When looking at the numbers or figures, how much American companies are investing to AI, it seems to be much higher than the ones in Europe. And it's partially due to the fact that they are acquiring more than our companies, the other small startups or bigger companies. So acquisition explains a big chunk of American investment figures. But then, for example, Google is investing only in the EU, only in the US, some 20 billion euros. So it's mostly about the private investment, what we are talking about. We are also helping as an EU by providing public financing, but public financing, it can be an enabler, but we should focus mostly on the private sector. If I should mention a couple of areas where we could create incentives, the first one is the availability of public data. This for sure would encourage investment. And second thing is to modernize our public services like education or social or healthcare. Because again, our public sector is much bigger than or larger than the one in the United States, and this could create new opportunities for using AI.
We have time for one last question from the audience. And I'm trying to read out. The EU is planning to invest 100 billion in research and innovation over 7 years, correct? Okay. Google alone is investing 20 billion in AI. How can we compete with that?
Well, first we have to ask what should be taken by, what should be made and who is responsible, whatever should be made in order to boost private investment. So it tells that there is no easy solutions. Our Horizon Europe Research Fund is the world's largest public research fund, and it's already a good answer. But then we have to look at the business environment, for instance, how to further develop our single market in order to promote private investment. We have FC, Juncker Fund, which can support private investment. But the good question is why European companies are not investing in AI more than they do. There may be one of the explanations that in statistics you cannot see clearly the industrial AI applications or investment. We are quite good in that, but American companies are investing more in consumer application. It's much more visible. But I'm sorry, I cannot give you very clear-cut and simple and easy answer because it's a complicated issue. The competitiveness overall is very important, but then we have to ask why our companies are not investing more than they do.
Very last question. You said you're not coming back to the next commission. Probably not even as vice president for the circular economy or artificial intelligence. Do you have plans? What to do after this?
I really don't know. I really don't know. This is the first time when I leave politics. I have been in politics entire my professional life, and this is the first time when I'm going to start doing something else. Politics has been very important for me. It has lit up my soul. And now I try to devise what else could do the same, because I also in the future want to do something which has a meaning and which is purposeful. My wife is running for the national parliament in Finland, and if she gets elected, then the home base will be in Finland, but I don't know where my jobs are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for stepping by.
Thank you very much.
For that and
thank you.
for your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you.